being able to understand that the work never stops. I think you get to new base camps.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, I'm not working on that anymore, but I still have work to do. And you get there and you're like, I thought at this point I was supposed to have all these conversations right. My relationships are supposed to be perfect. I'm supposed to be able to, everything's supposed to be easy, but it's not.
That's our ego. You know what I mean? Coming in to protect us, right? Because it doesn't want to grow. It's scared. That's the part of us that is scared. That's attached to all of the subconscious stuff that I mentioned. Really, if I could tell anybody listening to this, like any piece of like valuable information, it would be pay attention to the steps every day versus looking at the big picture after a year. Because your character development is what's more important than what you're getting out of it. But really what it is the process of how can I become that woman?
The thing that I gleaned from our conversation the other day is that you are a very powerful manifester in your life. I mean, your life has completely changed. I mean, we met working at a restaurant in Santa Monica, and now you have totally transformed your life. You lived in another country for a couple of years doing these retreats. You've become a life coach. And from the conversation that we had, I was like, wow, Navjot really listens. She listens to the signs. And I think that that is such an important thing to bring to other women is like, how do I know that this is the moment that I'm supposed to step into a role? This is the moment I need to listen. So tell me about like that impetus that you were like, oh, this is my moment for change.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on, Cristina. We were laughing earlier because we wanted to say our names the proper way. But yes, thank you for having me on. I am just so grateful to be here, that we've connected and reconnected on a different level. And even right now, as you described, kind of from the outside looking in of how you perceive my reality over the past few years and how much I've changed and transformed, it's so interesting because my brain was like, whoa, that actually all did happen. You know what I mean? Because when you're in it, you don't realize, like, I'm human. Yeah. Like, that took a lot out of me. You know what I mean? And like, you know, when you're growing, you're just always kind of looking at the big picture. And it's always like, I'm not there yet. So I love the way you just described everything that you've seen me transform, because I'm like, whoa, like I can pause and be present and be like, wow, I forgot how much value all of that brought to my life and how talking about it and sharing that story can really help others. Yes. So thank you so much. Yeah. I'm excited to be here. And yes, we are hosting an amazing event next month, Conquer the Room in October. Oh yeah. So we have 2 months in October. Yes. Conquer the Room. So I'm excited to dive in about that. But I loved your question, because I feel like it's going to be so related to what we are going to be holding space for on October 7th. And to answer your question, leaping is hard. Leaping is really, really hard. And the reason why it's hard is because we have not been taught to trust the unknown. So when you asked, how did I know to just leap into that new role, you know, it was always before that moment. I had always thought, oh, I have to wait till I'm ready. You know what I mean? Which I think is why leaping is so hard. Because how do you know when you're ready? You know? And it's really just about staying open, right? So doing the logical steps towards things is obviously really hard work also, because you have to keep going and you can't give up. But there's this aspect of it, which we're going to get into, which is manifestation. How do you bring that dream to you so that you just go and you're like, yes, I accept this opportunity. Yes. And trusting that like you're ready for that. So to answer your question, I was doing a lot of things internally, internal work, I would call it, along with external aligned stuff to what I wanted to be. So let's go with life coaching, right? Because there's so many new roles that I've had taken on in the past 3 years, being a retreat host, being a life coach. These are all things that I have written about countlessly in countless pages in my journals for years and years and years. And of course, our thoughts create our reality. So the more that I'm going to write that, the more my reality is going to show me that, which I'm writing. So I was like, I'm going to have an online business. I'm going to serve people around the world. Back then, I did not know how, right? It's always the what and the why that we're clear on, and the how and the when is up to the universe, right? And when those how and the whens show up, it bounces back to us and we have to say yes. So does that make sense a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the piece about journaling because I think that journaling is a lot more powerful than I think we think it is.
Yeah.
I just read an email yesterday. I did this app. I was using this app called Reframe last year to kind of journal about my drinking.
Oh.
And so they send me these emails pretty regularly. And one of them was talking about how journaling allows us to hold ourselves accountable, helps us to goal set. It helps us to reflect in a way that allows us to kind of brain dump. And so I think it's really important to continue to write down the things that we want because like you said, it then has no other choice but to show up in our life, like as we walk around. And so if we continue to put down our wishes on paper, which is something that we're going to be doing in this workshop, is being able to not only say out loud to people, but to have it concretely written down and saying like, this is something that I want. These are things I've dreamed about for years. And so many of the things that we have dreamed about is like the thing that we're scared of.
Yes.
The thing that we've been holding on to for so long.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. And I think sometimes it feels a little bit bigger than us.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really important piece
Yes.
to getting the dreams that we want is writing them down.
I think so too. And that's like really where that what and the why comes in, right? Because if you don't know the how or when, right, you have to know the what and the why first because the universe is trying to have us be clear, right? And it's like when we're clear about what we want and why we want it, that's our intention. That's what's fueling that what. And I think innately, and this might be a bold statement, but I think innately as children, we do know. We do know what our thing is.
Yeah.
It's just that society, our upbringing, our parents, our, teachers, everything in this world is limiting us. So of course we're adults. We knew when we were kids what it was, right?
Yeah.
I knew, what my gifts and talents were, but then it all unravels and it gets hidden, you know what I mean? By all these layers and layers of programming of like, that's not possible, or you can't possibly do that. You just did it and you failed, right? And it's like all those projections that people throw on us.
Yeah.
So then of course, when you're an adult and you're getting back into this and trying to, because your life's not just meant for you to be doing shit that you're not meant to be doing. Everybody has that moment, I think, in adulthood when they're like, wait a second, this doesn't feel good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this was like helping me survive, but now it's just not making me feel good. I know I need to be someone else. So going back to that too, of like, how do you know when it's like, now it's my time to be that person? Like journaling is honestly just like the first step if I was to go step by step. But this is such a becoming process that sometimes it isn't logical steps, right? But journaling is where everybody can start with your what and your why and see what starts coming up for you as soon as you write that down unapologetically. You know, because even me writing down that I want to be a talk show host one day, even me writing down that I'm going to be a life coach, I'm going to host international retreats. That would bring up all of my shit. You know what I mean? Like all the reasons, all the voices, pay attention to those voices. I love that you used the word brain dump. So if we want to know what's subconsciously blocking us, because our conscious mind is like, yeah, of course I want to do that. Right. But the subconscious mind is like, I can't do that. Why would I be able to do that? And then it starts to give so many reasons why not.
Yeah.
So this is why we don't take action, because they're not communicating with the same story, the subconscious and the conscious. So the what and the why, get your journals out, get that down.
Yeah.
The how and the when. Now, when that comes in from the universe, from your reality, right? Even if you're not spiritual, you don't need to call it God or the universe. Your reality on a quantum level is going to start molding to that. And then you have to say yes. And you're not going to be ready. And that's where the resistance comes up. And you have to work through that resistance, of just becoming that person and putting forth those scary actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you just said right there is like the key piece is like, yes, step one is journaling, but action is more powerful than just knowledge. So what I hope to bring and what I feel like has been so powerful in my life in just like the last year or two is closing the gap between the moment that you journal the thing that you want and the moment you do something about it.
Yes.
And not having that be 5 years, having that be today what is the first step? What is the first actionable step that I can take towards that goal? Because I feel like that's the gap that people live in for so long, is thinking, and knowing. And then that subconscious mind, like you're saying, can come up with so many reasons like why you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that you do is subconscious healing. And I was really curious, with all of the women that you've worked with over the past 2.5 years, what is the thing that you have seen most women come in trying to heal, that they're trying to like let go of, that they're trying to shed?
Yeah.
What has been like, have you seen any themes?
I do, actually, with women, shame and guilt. So the two energies that really, and emotions that really block our sacral chakra, which is our second chakra, which is right there by your vajayjay. And actually that energy center is so powerful, right? Because as women, we give life, we give birth. We're the vessel to bring souls into bodies. And whether or not you're going to be a mom, you know, you have that energy center there. So it could be the same thing as birthing an idea into a reality, right? And so shame and guilt, imagine if that energy center is blocked with those things. It's the opposing energy, right? Yeah. And so the reason why I say shame and guilt, and just to go deeper into that, a lot of women have been so, like, their shame and guilt receptors have been so out of whack, right? And then you hear this society now where it's like, just get rid of all shame and guilt altogether, right? But I want to dive into that a little bit too.
Yeah, let's do it. This is such an interesting conversation.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing as far as patterns that women go through, the shame and guilt is almost way too much. Right. So this is why they lack boundaries, right? Most of the time, if we're not setting boundaries with ourselves first, okay? So that means like doing what you're say you're going to do, right? Boundaries, integrity, like all of that energy, like protecting your energy has a lot to do with building out your projects in life. And I think a lot of people wouldn't realize that. Right. But you have to have boundaries with yourself. You have to have boundaries with other people, or else how will you be able to focus your energy? Right. Yeah. And on a subconscious level, if we're acting on shame and acting on guilt and living off of those emotions rather than it just being an emotion, which isn't a wave that comes and goes to teach us something, right? If we're living from that space, all your decisions will be based on that space. Yeah. So you saying yes to partying and going out the day that you just wrote down your goals and not putting any action step towards it, because you are ashamed of saying no to your friends and you don't want to sit with that emotion of shame. Right? You don't want to sit with the emotion of shame of putting forth the first step towards your goal and then it not going the way that you expected. So then you give up, right? But then guess what comes around? The guilt demon, right? Because you're going to feel guilty because you just wrote it down. You just said, I'm going to do this. And then you didn't. So then the guilt demon comes up. Right? Yeah. And then we're trying to like manage that emotion. And most of us just numb it and repress it instead of listening what it's there for. Yeah. Right? There's a reason why we need guilt. It helps us take care of ourselves too. Right. Right? If I wasn't feeling guilty all the time, I mean, of course, give yourself grace. That's a huge part of the work that I do. But pay attention. You know what I mean? Yes. What are you sorry for? Because guilt is I'm sorry. You're sorry for something, right? I'm sorry for not taking action towards my goals. But then what do you do with that? You know, you're not transmuting that energy by just being sorry all the time. Yeah. Right. And so those two emotions are so interesting because I see them the most with women and how they block. So that's an example of how they can like block us from doing the thing. Right. And then if we're not listening to them at all, or like, you know, or it's like, okay, yeah, I don't need to feel guilty. Let me just give myself grace again. And then 365 days go by and all you've done is give yourself grace. Right. Which is usually where, you know, society, if we like hear right now, we hear these words all the time, like, oh, don't feel guilty, you know, don't be ashamed, you know? Yes. And so that was what we were talking about the other day. That was so interesting because I think I brought up like the example of like a psychopath not having any guilt receptors.
Right. Yes. And it's so interesting being able to balance those two because I think we get fed one or the other. Yeah. Don't feel any shame. Don't feel any shame. And then on the other hand, you have like the videos that are like, in your face. And like, you know, you have to be so hard on yourself in order to get anything. Like get fucking on the boat, you know? Yeah. And it's so in your face. And it's like finding where it feels actually comfortable and lies in the middle for you so that you have room to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
And also you have that drive to stand up and be like, I didn't do what I said I was going to do.
Right.
And I think that when we don't listen to that, then we find ourselves, like you said, in a year of no movement.
No movement. Imagine you got yourself a lot of grace, but you're now lacking integrity because you're not doing what you said you were going to do, right? You're going to be dealing with more shame and guilt because now it's just getting trapped in your body, right? Rather than like feeling it in a healthy way and releasing it and making the change, right? Like all negative emotions we have are there so we make a change, right? Anger and frustration. I'm not going to keep pointing my finger out at other people. Where am I lacking boundaries? You know, why is that so scary for me? Because that's really what needs to be happening. You know, that's just an example of a change that anger calls, right? And so, so I loved, I just want to piggyback off of something really important that you said, because I used to write a lot and years would go by and I wouldn't take action towards my goals. And I love that you said, let's bridge that gap. Let's bridge that lag time. That bounce back time, right? Where you're like, okay, now I'm finally ready. So when I first hired my coach, she had me say this mantra for about a year, and it was do it scared. And I think this relates back to the shame and guilt stuff a lot, especially shame, because if we have a healthy relationship with shame, we are going to be okay with taking the small steps to get to the big picture. It's humbling, right? It's an honor to get up and try again, you know. And I love what you and I had talked about on our live, which I'd love for you to share again, is about taking reality as data. So most of us, right, like we're like, so we struggle with shame so much that it runs our life, so we don't even try. But guess what if I said to you, take the action, deal with the emotions after, because at least then you've taken the action. Now let's start to work with your subconscious mind. What's coming up for you? Are you afraid? Did that first video suck? Did that first audition suck? Let's talk about it. But at least you went and you did it, you know? And and I love that, because what you had said, which I'd love for you to share right now if you can, is it was something along the lines of like looking at reality as data. Because I think that is how we can have a healthy relationship with shame. Because it's okay to feel shame. It's all right. It's normal. It's human. But when it blocks us from taking action, or we make assumptions about our reality, now everything's doomed. No, baby, it was just data. So let me hear about that.
Data. So I read Payal Kadakia's book. I hope I'm saying her name right, but it's Payal Kadakia, and she wrote a book called Life Pass. Because she created the app Class Pass. I don't know if you ever looked at the app where you can sign up for multiple classes and you can kind of try out all these different studios. And she is such a powerful manifester and brought her ideas to life. Everything she wanted, from relationship to being, you know, a businesswoman after being a dancer who felt like she wasn't getting what she wanted in all of those spaces, and then creating the reality that she wanted. And she talks about failure being a data point. But I love that you wrote reality, that you just said reality being a data point, because I think you could also word it like that. Whatever your reality is, like living and sitting in that. And then also failure, being able to kind of destigmatize that word. And you know, there was a book I was reading, I don't remember what it was, but it was a father who was asking his kid, when his kids come home, he would ask them, like, what did you fail at today? And letting them open this conversation about what they maybe didn't do right that day, and being able to look at that as a positive thing, as opposed to being like, oh, what did you succeed at? Did you get a good grade? What did you do good at? And being able to examine the things that you do wrong and being able to learn from it. And it's something that I teach in my movement classes as well, to kids, to adults, to everyone. Is it okay to not be good at something the first time that you try it?
Absolutely.
Is it okay that you're not good? Is it okay that somebody didn't like you? Is it okay that you need to practice in order to get better? Because so much of what we see, I think, online these days is a lot of practice, and we don't think things take rehearsal anymore. We don't think things long term. We think of them very short term. And when we don't get that instant gratification, then we feel like we shouldn't do it at all. And circling back to the point, I think that failure is really important. It's an important part of the process, and it should be something that's actually enjoyed.
Yeah.
And it's part of stepping into that role.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful story about the dad and what did you fail at today? That struck a chord for me in my heart, just because I know that many of the women I work with struggle with shame and guilt so much because when we were children, we weren't given that space. So if we talk about subconscious healing, it starts with our inner child. Yeah. And we weren't given that space to make mistakes. And there was a lot of shame around that, right? The unhealthy amount of shame. That's why shame becomes our way of being. It's not an emotion anymore.
Yes. I was also thinking about, have you ever heard of Joe Dispenza?
Oh, yes. I love him. Yeah.
So I just got introduced to him like from a year ago from a friend.
Yeah.
And he always talks about, I think his line is that your personality creates your personal reality. And that these emotions that we get addicted to, like guilt and shame, become our personality.
Yes.
It's not just an emotion that, like you said, is a wave that comes in and out. It now becomes the way that we run our life and the way that we rule all of our actions. And that's what makes it so hard to move, because we've now changed our makeup and we can't access the way that we felt when we were a child.
Right.
Because we've like masked on top this other person.
Yes. That is what I've been studying the past, decade of my life, is identity work. So I love that you brought up Joe Dispenza, because he has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because
that's the one I read.
Yeah, it's so good,
so
right?
Powerful.
And it's all identity work. So as I talk more about shame and guilt and I'm learning more about these emotions, you're totally right. Like, they become your identity. Right. And it's like, I'm not good enough, right? Because I failed. And then all those spirals, imagine that's just one I am not. You know what I mean? Yes. Imagine all the I am statements that you're taking on that were not your birthright. You didn't come here with those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's actually, I am love. I am light. I'm talented. I'm gifted. I can do this. Yeah. But we have this beautiful experience of being human. That's why we have to make friends with our demons, with our shadows, because they're not going to go away. We have a mind that picks up information from our reality, from our data point of life since we were kids. You know, mom and dad are mad at me. Oh, I must be a piece of shit. Then you start identifying as being a piece of shit, and then you start acting like being a piece of shit because you're not trying to. It's just what's going on in your mind, right? And it's like thoughts to emotions to behaviors, right? Yeah. And when we talk about bridging that gap and being able to like get clear with it, it's really about healing on like the deepest level, right? And you can do it backwards too. I do that all the time. I always say to my clients, reverse engineer this shit. Yes. Take the actions first. Then, like I said, work through the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that come up for you, right? So that's why, especially when you're relating it to goals, right? When I'm working on a few other things with my clients, like relationship building and stuff like that, there's a lot that to do with communication and things of, you know, but you're still never going to get those things right. So it's like, have those difficult conversations, people. Just learn from them afterwards.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because that was the other piece. The fact that you're never going to get it right. Yeah. And being able to understand that the work never stops. I think you get to new base camps.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, I'm not working on that anymore, but I still have work to do. And you get there and you're like, I thought at this point I was supposed to have all these conversations right. My relationships are supposed to be perfect. I'm supposed to be able to, everything's supposed to be easy, but it's not. It's just that you now have hit like a new base camp. So I wanted to know from you, like, you've done a lot of work on yourself. Yeah. You have taken these action steps. You trust yourself. You have integrity in the goals that you set for yourself, but are you still doing the work? Do you feel like you still have some of these thoughts that come up where you're like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that, Navjot.
Absolutely. Because now my bigger dreams are haunting me and scaring me. And I'm like, now I have to have integrity with those. Those are fucking scary. You know what I mean? And I think we all, like I said, bold statement, but I think we all came into this world with such big dreams. And if we keep looking at the big picture, it's fucking daunting. So you're absolutely right. We do have a base camps that we hit, right? And it's all ego work. That's what I realized. I used to think ego was just like when someone's really pompous or they're very pretentious or like whatever. But actually all of that is ego work. Everything you just said, word for word. I thought I'd be here by now. I thought I would, have all this done by now. I thought this would be easier. That's our ego, you know what I mean? Coming in to protect us, right? Because it doesn't want to grow. It's scared. That's the part of us that is scared. That's attached to all of the subconscious stuff that I mentioned. So if we're friends with our darkness, it has less power over us. Yeah. So when I say ego work and all that, that's just what came to mind first. But like, that is something I'm definitely going to cover that at the workshop, because we need to go deeper into the identities we've taken on. Ego just means identity on the physical plane. So what have we taken on? What identities have we taken on? I'm not good enough. I thought this, I thought that. It's the part of us that wants control. Yeah. So I think control is also a huge part of it. You know, like not trusting in the unknown, because you're really operating a lot from your left brain then, right? Like you really want control. You want to see it to believe it. Well, can you believe it and put yourself in the action steps in order to see it, right? Yes. That's where we build character. That's where we hit those base camps. That's where we give ourselves grace, humility, and all those other beautiful tools that we also experience, and those wonderful emotions like patience, right? And trust, right? And beauty. Because there's so much beauty in that journey, right? Even when we started this podcast, you had mentioned all these things that I've accomplished. And even my human mind is like, oh shit, my human mind was like, my ego was like, I'm not where I want to be at. Why is she reflecting all these things back to me of what I've done? So literally, to answer your question, yes, my brain still does that. Yeah. Right. And it's so important to recognize, wait, the base camp I was at a few years ago was completely different than the base camp now. Yeah. Right. And I always feel like there's this huge threshold. And I think this is what our event is really for, is because once you cross the threshold, you understand life a bit better, and then you kind of want to get to that base camp. You don't have as much resistance anymore. It's still the same process, that because it's life.
Breakthrough. Yes. Like the gateway drug.
It's the gateway drug to your dreams.
Yes.
Literally. And it's so humbling. It's so humbling because, like I said, do it scared was my mantra the first year that I actually started putting all these visions and dreams into action. And that was the most humbling year of my fucking life, because I had to keep going even though I wasn't seeing any movement at first, right? And so really, if I could tell anybody listening to this, like any piece of like valuable information, it would be pay attention to the steps every day versus looking at the big picture after a year. Because your character development is what's more important than what you're getting out of it. It's just your ego that says, I want that, talk show. I want to be on stage. I want to be a writer. I want to be this. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want that car. I want that house. I want that family. That's what the ego is saying. But really what it is the process of how can I become that woman, right? What kind of stuff does kind of stuff does she do? Action-wise, what kind of stuff does she say to herself, to others? How does she speak her reality into existence? How does she work through difficult emotions? Because when you get that thing, you're still human. You're still going to have difficult emotions. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying the character development is more important. So if you shift your perspective and reframe what you're doing, it helps you get through a lot of the resistance. Yeah. And you give yourself like so much love along the way. Right. And so, I mean, it's just wonderful work. And I'm excited for the women that come to our event, because I know what it feels like to not feel supported and just feel like, okay, I'm reading all these things, or I'm watching all these videos, or I'm looking at all these self-development podcasts and books and stuff like that. But like, how can I actually start putting this stuff into action? Yes. And I think because we understand both pieces, the action and the subconscious crap that convinces you not to do those things, and all these emotions that we have to work through in the character development, I think that this is going to be such a beautiful, 3-4 hours of an experience that could completely change the trajectory of these women's lives. Yeah. And I don't say that lightly, because I know that that's what we can bring to the table. And I'm excited. I'm so excited, because workshops, retreats, working with somebody to give me that support, even if it's just for 4 hours, maybe it's for longer, I don't know. It's just been a complete game changer for me to be in those spaces. Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple things that you said. Yeah. First of all, becoming friends with your darkness. That's something that we want to bring to light, is what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Yes. Let's actually know what they are, so that when you do present yourself for that big job or that opportunity or that person who is going to maybe have an opportunity to change your life, you are able to present your full self and you're not scared. of that full self. And being able to have somebody there, and why it's so important to do this, I think, in community, is because you have someone to reflect back to you. Because in your own head, you can't see all the things that someone else can see. And even reflecting to you how I perceived our conversation the other day and how far you've come. And being able to say, like, this is what I see. And I think that's why it's important to do in community and be able to say it out loud and have somebody just see you.
Right.
As you fully are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that portion of what we're going to be holding space for, because it is very, very important to be able to communicate yourself. Right? Because when you start journaling and writing, when you start putting yourself out there, the opportunity is going to come your way. Whether it's a circumstance, whether it's a person standing in front of you, and how are you going to say yes? Or how are you going to leap, right? Because the universe did its job. It brought you the person, right? It brought you the thing that you've been wanting. Your what and why was clear. It gave you the how and the when, right? So how do you say yes? Right? How do you say, this is what I do? This is who I am.
Yeah.
In a way where it's like, you can't describe yourself and what you do in a few sentences. Of course not. Right? But how can you energetically pull it all together in a way where that person trusts you? And it's more about trust than it is about over-explaining, because over-explaining is not confidence. That is coming from a place of you where you don't trust yourself.
There's a lack of clarity.
Lack of clarity.
When you need so many words and you're circling around to try to explain all of the things that you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's why practicing owning your titles and being super clear so that you can be succinct and short.
Right.
And the other piece of that is body.
Yes.
Is being able to, like you said, energetically show somebody that you can trust me.
Yeah.
And I know who I am. And I know not only the good things about me, but I also know my dark side. And you can show that with the way that you hold your chest, with the way that you have eye contact, with the way that you literally walk into a room. And I think that's why what we're bringing is so powerful, because that can't happen until you've actually done the work internally. And you're thinking the thoughts, I am desirable, I am worthy. And when you're thinking those thoughts, it emanates off of you and you can move differently. And the way, I'm sure you've been in a room where somebody walks in and you haven't even seen them yet, but you look. Yes. Because you can feel a presence. And I think that presence is something that's really hard to be taught, because it has to come from you.
Yeah.
And you just have to give yourself the space to do the work.
Yeah.
And put yourself in the room and be like, okay, like, let me do this work.
Yeah.
And then it opens up.
Yes. And when you're a clear channel, the people that you need to talk to in that room, they're going to come right to you. And that's where the manifestation is. Yeah. Because you did that inner work. I think a lot of the times we think about manifestation as this very woo-woo thing. And it's just all about getting what you want and all this shit. But that's when the ego's taken over it. Right. So you might get little things here and there, but it's not going to be sustainable. Sustainable is doing the identity work. It's having a clear channel. Right. So what we're talking about, by the way, everybody, is we're going to be holding space for you to create your own elevator pitch. Right. And being able to express who you are and what you do, and adding to that embodiment, right? Yes. Is also how you're gonna not just say the words, but attract who you need to attract in those rooms.
Yes.
And say yes. And have that energy be so soft, grounded, you know what I mean? Centered, because in a relaxed state is how we manifest. And I think that's the portion that people forget, right? It's let me just write all this stuff down. Let me change my identity. Let me do my affirmations. Yeah. But then it's when you embody it, you're relaxed, you're leaned back, your shoulders are up, your chest is forward, your chest is open, right? Your chest space is open, your heart space. And so it's just so beautiful, because I think that is the part that people get tripped up on, because it's not always I think talked about also. So I love that we're incorporating both into our workshop, especially with your, experience in embodiment and in dance, and making it fun, you know?
Yes. That I love the match and the meeting between the two worlds of woo woo and then ooh, being able to put those two together. Yes, because we're so layered. The woo woo, and the ooh. Yeah.
And the ooh. Drop it down, baby.
Yeah, because we're so multifaceted, and I think like we don't have to hide any part of ourselves, you know.
Yes, and the inner work does not need to be so serious, guys. Like we forget, like, you know, that's what a lot of people are like, inner work. Why is nothing manifesting? And it's like because you're taking yourself a little too seriously, you know. Like your ego still has a hold over that. You think inner work is logical, like you go to school and you study these classes and then you get a degree. It's like yes, but no. You know what I mean? There are some things you need to do, but it's not so much like that. You have to relax into your body. You know what I mean? You have to feel yourself. Learning how to feel yourself, right? It's not something you can learn out of a book. Yeah. You know, it's going to be by putting yourself in a space, right? Or, you know, in this case, you're going to be teaching us and guiding us, right? And then from there, you're going to look in the mirror and it's just going to be different. Yeah. It's just going to be different. You're going to be cleared out of the old story, the old narratives that hold you back from your body. Because I think we forget that our body is so connected. Yeah. So if we're thinking all that crap, it has to go somewhere. That energy has to sit somewhere. Yeah. And that's why our shoulders close in and we close our heart and all this stuff. And that's so much deeper than logic and just logic, right? So it's intuitive.
I love that you and I are the two people to bring this in this particular setting, because I think from talking to you, both of us have done the work in really hard situations, like leaving really bad relationships, leaving jobs that we didn't like, leaving just situations that didn't feel fun anymore, that felt boring, and like going for that next step. And both you and I are still wanting more and still wanting to grow. And it's not coming from two people who are like, I'm perfect and I have all of these lessons to teach you. It's more so how we can share in presenting ourselves in a better, more genuine way.
Oh yeah. I love that. I love vulnerability from leaders. I love, you know, you and I are just going to like lay our heart out there, you know, in order for them to really truly understand the path of creating your dreams into a reality, because I think that piece is so important, especially with the leaders that you're like choosing or that you resonate with. So if anybody is looking for like a real ass experience,
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I want everyone to know I'm going to put all of Navjot's information in the show notes, and we're going to also be putting in all the information for our workshop. Any last words that you want?
Yeah, I just feel like I'm just so grateful. I feel like this connection is really powerful, and I'm excited to not only host this event, but do further podcasts with you.
Yeah.
Different topics.
Thank you.
Thank you.